tonight we're going to be focusing on, because it's warmer weather now and people are getting out playing volleyball, baseball, throwing things, frisbee, just kind of doing this motion a little bit more. I thought it would be good to kind of go over some of the ranges of motions that we need for that and how we can improve those positions. So we'll start with this. So what I want you guys to do here, we kind of did, last week we did, or on Wednesday we did some of this range of motion up against the wall. And so now we're gonna build this position. So rotating in. And what that looks like is when we rotate down here, if we're missing range of motion, which you can see I am, we ideally want 80, almost 90 degrees down. What'll happen is everything will roll forward. So you can see how this triggers my neck to function, it compresses everything. And this is what we kind of do repetitively, which can start to wear down the shoulder, elbow, wrist, all those areas. So what I want you guys to do, you can even take your other hand here and just feel this shoulder, this arm bone here is rotating forward. Rotating in the socket, but not popping forward. So see if you can see how far you can go. You can see my wrist wanted to cheat to go a little bit further, but keep that wrist level with your forearm. And how does it feel? So what's the quality of movement? Does it feel like it's smooth? I can come and check this side here. So again, we're avoiding that and we're just seeing what that rotation is. So I'm a little bit more flexible on this side. So what we're gonna start here is we're gonna kind of warm up the tissue and then we're gonna get into a couple of different stretches. So what I want you guys to do here is we're gonna go on the back of the shoulder blade. We've done this a couple times just for different purposes, but we're gonna go, if you find the bottom part of your shoulder blade here, we're gonna lay with the ball like this, or you can be up against a wall. So I'm gonna can even kind of come from the side here, and I'm gonna rest actually gonna bring ball down a little bit. Okay, so bottom of the shoulder blade. And what I'm gonna have you do is just settle into it here for a second. And then you can start to move your arm a little bit. Your arm's not gonna go too far just because of the ball is kind of blocking that movement in your shoulder blade. Do a little wiggle. These aren't very thick muscles. So as you're coming into some rotation here, I can kind of drop forward into that movement that I want to improve. And when you start to do some of this movement, because the muscle is not super thick, sometimes it can just be a little bit too intense. So pay attention to that. Even if you just lay here while I'm talking, that's totally fine. So now we're going to go a little bit overhead because we want to play with, okay, I'm working on that overhead position. Let me see what my body wants to do with my arm in that position. So it's a little bit tighter in that area, so I'm still bottom of the shoulder blade. You can find different corners here. My shoulder doesn't even want to go in that position. There we go. I can play with some rotation higher up here. I can also take my arm across my body. So I'm going to get a little bit of pressure off of the ball, but just working that shoulder in a different position. Okay, so same side. You'll feel, so you're on the lower part of your shoulder blade, you'll feel a bone, a horizontal bone. It's a spine that pops off of your shoulder blade. we're gonna go right above that. So you're kind of in the trap area, but we're more on the shoulder blade here. And I find the ball kind of jumps around in this position quite a bit. So what I like to do is lift my hips up. So this is just pinning the ball to stay in that position. And then we'll go through some of the same movements. So I'm going to move my arm out to the side, back down, come out to the side, add some of that rotation. So we're working on that rotator cuff, a group of muscles that stabilize the shoulder. And we're specifically working on the ones that actually rotate our arm back this way. But if they get tight, they won't allow our shoulder to come forward either. So that's why we're tackling this. Okay, I'm gonna come across the body here and really feel that one. And then come up overhead. Kind of make a little arc here. Okay, go ahead and drop your hips down. We're gonna hit one more spot on this side. So this is actually a perfect shirt for this. So it's basically right where your shoulder, your sleeve meets the rest of your shirt. And you'll feel, I can actually kind of grab a chunk of muscle here. And what we're doing is we're working the back side of that here with this ball. So ball goes here. I'm gonna lay on my side like that. Support my head here. Let's scoot back. Okay, we're back in that armpit that can get really nervy, so pay attention to that. We're still on that rotator cuff area. I'm just gonna kind of rock back and forth here. I can straighten my arm. So I'm kind of putting my shoulder into this overhead position here. Get a little bit of rotation back and forth. There we go. Okay, we're gonna take a break on that side. So before we switch sides, let's go ahead back into this position here. And again, feel for quality. Sometimes you'll get a little more range of motion. So I'm feeling more range of motion there. But it also, it's not a ton more range of motion, honestly, with that one for me, but it just feels smoother. There's less popping around. And then you can also kind of look at that overhead position side to side just to see. Okay, other side, bottom of the shoulder blade here, laying on your back. There we go. Settle into the ball. Add some of that side to side. A little bit of rotation. A little bit across the body. And then over. And if you do an overhead sport, you can even kind of mimic that position. So playing volleyball, I could come out to the side as if I'm gonna hit overhead and just see how that shoulder feels. If I do more of a frisbee, I can take my arm through that range here. If I just lift weights overhead, maybe I just come straight up like that. Oh, let's go above that little bone. So shoulder blade, we work down here, the spine of the scapula, shoulder blade here, and then right above. This is the one that tends to kind of jump around, so we're gonna lift the hips up, settle in, and then start to add some of that movement. Come overhead. And a lot of times people will notice some crunching through a lot of these movements. The crunching sensation, oftentimes, it can be little bone spurs just from the joint not functioning optimally over the years of bone hitting bone and tendon hitting bone. But a lot of times it can just be because there's tight areas and weak areas in the shoulder. And because the shoulder is such a mobile area in the body, it requires coordination of all of that. So I wouldn't worry about it unless it starts to cause a ton of pain or is always crunching. So just think of it as we're improving the crunch. Okay, so now we're gonna go right where your sleeve fits your shirt. I'm gonna lay on my side here. There we go. Make sure there's nothing nervy. And straighten that arm. Kind of rock back and forth here. Okay, let's come back up. Get your arms in that rotation position here. So same thing, not a ton of increased range of motion for me, but it just feels much smoother, much smoother. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, you can do this with a single ball, but I would prefer the double only because I want a little bit more of a more surface area. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in between shoulder blade and spine, and you'll see actually when I reach my arm behind my back here, sometimes the shoulder blade will lift up. That's where we're going. So you're gonna lay on your back with the balls there. And then all I'm gonna do is slide this hand underneath my back. So sometimes this is as far as you're gonna go. Maybe you hit your butt cheek, maybe not even that far. It's okay if you can't go all the way behind your back, but this would be somewhat of the goal here. So I'm here and I'm just going to rock my legs side to side. So we're working muscles in between shoulder blade and spine. We can add a little bit of hip movement here. And you'll see what we're doing here is with our hand behind our back, we're mimicking kind of that scarecrow position that we've been working on. Roll a little. I feel like this is probably one of the most common areas where people will complain of knots. So you may feel little bumps as you're rolling over the muscles. And those are some of the areas we're starting to slowly kind of work through. Get to relax. Let's come up a little bit higher with the double balls. So you'll see that's pretty close to my neck here. Hands still behind the back. Do a little bit windshield wiper here. Hips can come up. Get a little bit of that rolling side to side. Nice little adjustment in the spine, little cracks and pops. And then go ahead and come on out. We'll check that position again before we switch to the other side. That's definitely more range of motion for me. So again, either more range of motion or just quality. We'll go between shoulder blade and spine on the other side now. There we go. And then hand behind your back. Add some windshield wipers. I think I've mentioned this at some point, but last November, I kind of tweaked my shoulder, flipping on some ice and carrying my dog who had just had surgery. And so it's feeling much, much better. But one of the subtle reminders that it's not quite there yet is, what did I throw? I tried to throw a ball overhead a couple weeks ago, and it's kind of that, you know, you can do daily activities and then all of a sudden you do something with higher speed. And so when I'm working with patients who do overhead activities, even if it's just, go ahead and lift your hips up if you haven't yet. Even if it's just like throwing the ball for your dog, it's really important to do strengthening in that overhead position. Our body doesn't magically heal from that kind of stuff, and we have to, especially because we don't tend to do a lot of overhead stuff on a daily basis, it's good to make sure that you're getting that strength back overhead. Okay, let's go up closer to the neck. Keep that hand behind your back. A little windshield wiper with the knees. And the hips up. All right, come on out of that. Let's check it out. Just see how that feels. A little bit more motion. All right, so one of a really common, I think it's actually called a baseball pitcher's stretch, because anything overhead baseball needs this range of motion. One of the most common stretches, at least from a PT standpoint, used to be here and pushing the arm down. So as you're doing this, you can kind of feel on the outside of the shoulder. The problem with that is we tend to be in a really forward position. So if you are laying on your side, make sure your shoulder is right underneath your hip. And then we can start to kind of push this down here. So as you're doing this, your body weight is basically pinning your shoulder blade into the ground, so it's not moving. So it's just your shoulder, and it doesn't. To me, it definitely doesn't feel like a stretch, and to most people, it just kind of feels almost like on the verge of pain. And it's not good to push through pain, but there is a piece of this stretch where we're working more on the joint than we are muscles. And so it's okay to work through some weirdness as long as it's not getting worse. So as you do this, you can, I'm gonna grab something for my head here because we're gonna hang out here for a second. So shoulder underneath the body, arm is out. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a little contract, relax. So I'm gonna push down as far as I can comfortably, and then I'm gonna resist. I'm gonna try to push back into this hand. So I'm activating the rotators on the back, and then I'm gonna relax. And I'm not cranking very hard with this top hand, but I'm gonna contract and then relax. And each time you can feel your shoulder kind of relax a little bit more. Contract. And you'll notice I have my hand above my wrist because I don't want to be doing this or cranking on that. We're just getting a nice, gentle stretch here. And you can just kind of move it around. You'll notice it might feel a little stiff after doing something like that. Check back in before you do the other side. To me, after doing joint stretches, it almost feels just a little bit stiff after, but you can see how much more range of motion that gave me. So that was a good one. So other side, just supporting my head. Shoulder is underneath my body. Arm here. Find out where that stopping point is first. And then push up this bottom hand, bottom shoulder. And then relax. And push up. And relax. All right, one more time. Push up. And then relax. And then we'll come on out of that. So that's not my favorite one. The field of movement and self-care has come up with some other really cool ways. But I just like to mention that in classes because so many people have heard of the pitcher stretch, sleeper's stretch, sometimes it's called that. So it's just nice to know that when you're doing that, we don't want to be here. We're going to be getting false range of motion here and stretch like that. So I will show you my favorite one. So what we're going to do is you're going to be laying on your back. We're going to do it by yourself, but you can actually add a friend because it'll just help you stay a little bit more honest, but I'll kind of guide you through that. So my hips are lifted up here, And again, you may not make it very far with your hands, that's okay. But ideally, we want to kind of come hand to hand here, and my shoulders are staying back into the ground. So I'm not letting them roll forward here. Shoulder blades are staying back, and then all I'm going to do is slowly lower my hips until I get a similar stretch, keeping those shoulder blades back. So don't worry about how far down I'm going. If you feel it pretty high, that is totally fine. And we're just getting that same joint without, so again, this is what we're watching for. We don't want that to come up. So come on out for a second. I like to do 20, 30 seconds when we're doing joint stuff because it just kind of feels a little bit, it's not the same as a stretch. Okay, so hips back up. Hand on top of each other, keep the shoulders back, and then slowly start to drop down. If you're starting to feel it in your elbow or your wrist, you're probably applying too much pressure. So just back off. There we go. And then go ahead and come down, shake it out. So if you have a friend nearby, what you can do is they can have their hands on the front of your shoulder. They're not pushing down too hard, but they can help you stay honest and keep you from coming forward. So you would basically go ahead and switch which hand was on top if you haven't yet. They would hold up here, and then as you would drop down, they just wouldn't let you come forward. So again, they're not pushing really hard. They're just holding to keep you in place. Slowly dropping down. Shoulders are staying in a good position. And then we can come on out. And then roll to your side and come on up. And then let's check in. Might have to kind of roll them out a little bit. Pretty darn good. Much, much better. So I'm probably still at about 60, 65 degrees. So I could use some more before I go and, you know, play volleyball or something like that, but much better position. The other things we need this range for: walking, running, and when we don't have this range, this dumps forward. So we're just trying to limit the dumping forward, since it just happens normally in life anyway. So if we can just improve that range of motion, push-ups especially too, push-ups and bench press. So let's just finish with a little bit of strengthening here. So I'm holding here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down and then slowly rotate up as far as I can. Rotate down. And this gives, I don't know if you guys can feel this, but really good just body awareness of is my shoulder moving, or is it my neck and my upper back? So the more repetition we actually get with stuff like this, we can start to feel when we are not calling it a bad and a good position, but when we're in a position that might be repetitively creating inflammation or damage in our body. So we just want to be moving from our joints and not always the same ones. So we're just getting some rehab strengthening here. Let's do 2 more if you can. All right, should feel that burn in here. So we're just using those muscles as you gain that range of motion. So thanks for hanging out tonight. This was the first class where it's just Facebook now. So what I want to do is actually right after I pop off, I'm going to shoot out a poll in the group to see if you guys want more live classes like this. Do you like just random tidbits of videos and information throughout the week? I just want to be here to create value for you and even have it be a little bit more interactive if that's what you guys are looking for. So keep an eye out for that poll so that we can get some feedback and really make this of value for you. With my schedule getting busier back in the clinic, I just want to be intentional about our time together so it can be helpful for you. So I would love any input and feedback you guys have. Thanks for hanging out and have a beautiful week.